Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dallas-Fort Worth user group meeting today. My name is Christopher Fugit, and I'll be starting out the presentation. Hopefully everyone can hear me and see my screen. I work for Civil Reminders as my business. I'm a Autodesk Expert Elite alumni, meaning that I'm no longer in the program. I've graduated from it, and so now I'm no longer. I have a blog.civil3dreminders. So today I'm going to be talking about the Civil 3D API changes that were introduced. And here's the topics that I'll be going over. It's not a comprehensive talking of the Civil 3D data shortcut API, but hopefully it'll get you enough information to get started and then make it better. So I'm going to show you how you can toggle it, the data shortcut toggle. So if someone hasn't set the working folder and the project, they can hit the button and it'll set the working folder and the project for them based on where the drawing's located at. I'm also going to show you how you can set the working folder project and associate the project. That way, when you switch between drawings, the working folder and project will switch with it. And then I'll show how to create references. So populating the data shortcuts in Prospector. And then I'll show how to create data shortcuts going the other way. And then I'll have time for questions through chat. So just as an introduction, I'm not going from step one. I'm going from a farther step where I'm just talking about the code that you need. To fill in for the portion of the code that you would need to get started, I created a YouTube video. And you can use this YouTube video to go through the steps. And then after I talk, I'll put the links and share the PowerPoint presentation so you can go and use those links. The data shortcut API is new. It only has support in 2020.6, 2021.1, and 2022.1. So if you download and you want to try this yourself, be aware that it only works on these 3 versions and newer. All right, so cool. So the first topic that I want to talk about is how to create a data shortcut toggle. This might not be applicable for everyone's workflow, but it will work for one drawing. I've just expanded it where it'll work for multiple projects. So where I work at is that we have a main project, in this case, DFWBIUG test B. And the surveyors, they have their own folder where it's read-only to all of the engineers. And so the surveyors have their own underscore shortcuts folder, and the designers have their underscore shortcuts folder. And the way it works is that the surveyors create data shortcuts in both locations. And so they have a need to quickly change between these projects. So when the surveyors put a drawing in deliverable, I want to make it easy for them to just hit a button and toggle between these 2 shortcuts projects. So that's the purpose of this tool, but it works on a single folder too. So this is a code that I've created for this presentation. Just to give some background, up here is a using statement. And these bring in namespaces from other code. And so here I have Autodesk Civil Data Shortcuts, and that's the namespace that the shortcuts reside in. The namespace for my project is down here. And if I were to reuse this code somewhere else, this is the namespace that I would use in the usings. So the usings just bring in other code. Next, I have just a line AutoCAD uses to find where all of the commands are. And so this tells Autodesk or AutoCAD to load all of the commands within this class or in this file. And so it's an optional item, like it says, but it makes it load faster because then AutoCAD just goes to these classes. It doesn't go to all the other classes that might be in your project. So it just makes AutoCAD load faster. Down here, we have a class, and that's just a container that's going to hold our methods and properties. And in this case, I just called it data shortcut commands because that's where I'm going to run my commands from. The next portion of the code, I have a command method. And this is the instructions to AutoCAD on what my command information is. I don't know if you've ever ran commands before, but at the command line, AutoCAD has a command that'll list all of the commands that are available, and you can set it up to be grouped via value. So this DFWBIUG is that group. And so if I run that command in AutoCAD, it'll list all of my commands here. The DS toggle is going to be my command name. And then I have it twice because you can localize stuff. So I can have my local command of DS toggle and my universal command. But let's say I have an office in Austin and they want to call it something else. I could still use DS toggle for my office and then give them the local command to use the name that they want. You can have command flags. And command flags, in this case, is modal. And that just means that the command's only going to work within this drawing session. You can have command flags.session, and that'll work across multiple drawings. It's just telling AutoCAD what scope this command is going to be run in. Below that, we have our document, and the document's just a fancy word for drawing. So it's really the drawing that's open in the user interface in Civil 3D. Null is just a word for nothing. And so I'm just checking to make sure that the document is something. There are cases where AutoCAD will let you run a command, but if there's no document, I don't want to run the command and I don't want an error message. So I'm going to go ahead and return and exit out. So the return is going to say, hey, I don't need this. So let's go and exit out and leave this. The editor is interacting with the drawing, so it's going to let you select objects, and it's going to run the command line so you can run stuff to the command line. And so this set of code is just the housekeeping that needs to happen on most of these commands. And so that's just how you kind of start it. And most of this code, other than renaming it, came from the wizard that Autodesk has that helps you set up your project. So then we're going to get into the code a little bit further. So here I have a try catch loop. And so what this does is it allows us to have some error catching. So if anything bad happens in the code area here, it's then going to catch the error. And then I'm going to write the error to the command line. So the exception is going to be what type of exception it's going to catch. And then I can just send that message to the command line. And so that way the user has some idea of what's going on. So here's a method called find shortcuts folder. And this is going to go and find all of those underscore shortcut folders relative where my drawing is saved. I'm going to have multiple instances of this method. And so I just want to make sure that if I'm going to use code multiple places, that I create a method and then use that method to call it. So here's this method that I've created to go find that data shortcuts folder. So this is a code block that I have. So I'm passing the document, which is the drawing. So let's say that drawing is located in the deliverables folder. And I want to go find all of my underscore shortcuts folders within here. And so I have 2 of them in this case. So here I'm going to give it the drawing location, and the name is the full path of the drawing. So in this case, it would be C Civil 3D projects, surveying, C3D underscore surveying, and deliverable, and then whatever the name is, maybe EG underscore surface. Then the get directory name allows me to take that path and get the directory information for this deliverable. So it's going to show me more information about that folder or the directory. And so there I have my directory info. So I'm going to take that and get the directory info information. This code actually is getting the directory name, so it's taking out the file name. Let's mess that up. All right, so the directory info is going to be the information. And so next, I'm going to have a while loop. And this while loop allows you to do something over and over again until the statement that you have here is false. And the root name here is going to represent whatever your root folder is, in this case, C. So as I go through this, as I go here, I'm going to get the parent information, and that's the folder that holds the current folder. And so I'm just going to go and zoom up and get the parent folder. And then I'm going to check to see if the root name is there. And if it isn't, if I'm not to the C drive, then I'm going to keep going until I get to the C drive. So now I want to get all of the folders in the current path. So I started out in deliverables on this line. I'm going to go get all of the subfolders, the first route, underscore shortcuts. There's no subfolder, so this answer is going to be 0. So here I'm telling it, get the directories that are named underscore shortcuts. I'm going to check to see if there's any. If it's 0, I'm just going to skip this if loop and go directly to where my parent is. And then I'm going to, once I get the parent, I'm going to go back here. And now I'm one folder up. So if I go up here, this is my current folder. I'm going to go get the directories if there's underscore shortcuts. There is 0, so I'm going to go ahead and do 0 there. This any loop is going to not get found, so I'm going to go down here. And so now I'm going to go up one folder, and now I'm in the surveying folder. And I messed up, right? So I described this wrong, right? There is one shortcuts folder here, so I messed up. So this is going to be 1. And so I'm going to end up adding that data shortcuts folder that I found to my directory infos is what I'm going to return. So I messed up there, sorry. But for the green one, that is 0. And so then I'm going to have no folders. So then the surveying is going to go up one folder. So I'm going to end up in my projects root folder. I'm going to find this one shortcuts folder. So I'm going to get 1. And then I'm going to add it to the list. And then I can go back up here, do the same thing for Civil 3D projects, which is the working folder, that's 0. And then for the last one, it's going to be going up to the C. I'm going to get 0 there. So I'm able to go and find all of the underscore shortcuts folder using just this block of code. And since I've made it a method, I can then reuse this code. And here I see that I have 2 references, and that Visual Studio is telling me that. And so now I've used this in 2 places. Instead of duplicating the code, I just have it in one spot. So in the next block of code, I'm going to go find the shortcuts folder. That's what I just showed. I'm going to see if there's any information within it. The exclamation point in C#.NET says the opposite of what it is. So if I have any, I'm going to then say that's going to be, if it's true, I then want to get the opposite. So that's going to be false. If it is false, I just want to let the user know that I wasn't able to find any shortcuts folders. And I'm just going to write that to the command line. And then here's that returns again. That's going to exit out of the code and in the command, because I can't set my working folder in the project without any information. So now I'm finally into a Civil 3D API call. And here I have the data shortcuts, get working folder. So this is going to get the currently set working folder that's in tool space, and then I can use that value. So if you want to know what's current, you just use data shortcuts.get working folder, and it's going to return a string value. Now there's different Windows treats paths a little bit differently. And sometimes it includes a backslash at the end of it, and sometimes it doesn't. I've just created a convention where I just trim out the ending backslash so I can just compare like to like, and I don't have to worry about that backslash at the very end. And so this trim is going to remove that single backslash. Now I have two backslash showing there because that's the way C# shows characters as backslashes. And that's because in the code, it uses backslashes for other reasons. In this case, I have the /, and that's indicating like it's a comment. And so the backslash also has a particular meaning. So that's why we got to do two of them. The first one is called an escape character. And then the second one is going to be the character that you actually want to use. So once I get the shortcuts, I want to see if there's just one. If there's just one, then I can just go ahead and set the first one that I have in the list, because that's going to be the only one. So this is the shortcut information that I got from the tree. So from that path, I want to get the working folder information so I can figure out what my working folder is, where my drawing is located at. And so I'm using a method again because I want to reuse this code later on. So on the next page, I have that method. I have my shortcuts directory info, and that represents the _ shortcuts folder. I have the parent, and that parent is going to be the folder that contains the _ shortcuts folder. In this case, the Civil 3D _ surveying folder. I then have the parent to that, and that's going to give me the working folder in this case, and that's going to be the surveying folder. And then I want to get the full name, and that's going to be from C all the way to surveying. And then I want to go ahead and trim it again. So I've got the working folder here. That's going to be the full name path. I'm going to trim out any backslashes at the end. And then I'm going to return the working folder. And that's going to be the string of where my working folder is located at. And so on the next bit of code, I have my working folder, and that's the method that I just called and showed. I want to make sure that the working folder needs to be set. So I'm going to see if it's equal to the current working folder. And if it is, then I'm going to set it. If it's not equal, I'm going to not set it because it's already set. I don't need to do anything. I don't know if you've noticed this, if you worked over VPN, but setting the working folder caused Civil 3D to go through all of the project folders within your working folder. Where I work at, we have like 1,000 projects within that folder, and that can take, depending on the user's connection, like 20 minutes just to set the working folder. So I don't want to have the users go through that in case they're in that. So I'm just going to have this nice check to do it. And then the data shortcuts.set working folder is the Civil 3D code that we want to use. And so here I have the project name. So I want to get the project name first or next. Here I have that shortcut directory info again. And that's going to be the _ shortcuts folder. So down here, I have a view in Visual Studio. When you hover over an object, it gives you information about it. Here I can see that it's the _ shortcuts folder. I'm going to get the parent. And then I'm going to get the name. And so this is going to be my project name that I'm going to use and set. I also want to use the data shortcuts get current project folder. So this is a Civil 3D call that's going to let me know what the current project is. And I'm going to call that the current project name. And then I'm just going to do that same check like I did last time. And I'm not going to set it if I don't have to. The reason why I'm doing this is because, again, if your user's over VPN, Civil 3D doesn't cache any data. So it's going to, if I set it, it's going to want to go through all your projects. And if you have like 100 data shortcuts over VPN, over a slow connection, it's going to take a while. So I don't want to do that. And then the last thing that I need to do for the DS toggle is refresh the shortcut node. Unfortunately, there's no way of doing that in the API. So I just have to send that string to execute and send it to the command line. And then I'm going to return. And so here's the demo of that. So I'm going to go ahead and Civil 3D. Here, I've got Civil 3D already open. Here I have drawing one. And I want the user's going to save it. So that would be kind of like my working folder, my workflow. So I've created a button that saves it. I want to make sure my DLL is loaded. So I'm going to use net load. And I'm going to select the DLL that Visual Studio has created. So then I'm going to set my working folder to my C drive just to show and demonstrate that nothing is set. And then I can run the data shortcuts toggle button. And it's gone and found where the project is, where the drawing is located at. It set its working folder and it set the project. So instead of making the user do it, we use intelligence and do it that way. So if I go back to my PowerPoint presentation, what's going to happen when we have two of them? And here I want to toggle it. So I want to go from the deliverable to the test B project. So in that case, the codes, I just have a block of code that'll go through. So here I have my current index. So I'm just going to assume that it's -1 as my starting one. I'm then going to go through each one of my shortcuts directories, get the working folder from the directory info, just like I did in the last group of code. And then I'm going to see if the working folder equals the current working folder. And I got the current working folder in the code above located at. And if the current index, I'm going to set it to what the current number is, +1, because I want to use the next current shortcut directory. A tuple is just a method in C# to store data. That's whatever you want it to be. And in this case, I'm going to store the directory info and the working folder name. Just because since I'm getting the working folder, I don't want to do it twice. So I'm just going to do it once and save the value. So then I'm going to add that information to my working folder info. And at the end of this, I should have what the current index should be. And I should have a collection of items that has the directory info as well as the working folder information. So I'm going to double check my current index value, because if it's -1, it's not going to be an item in the list. And if it's greater than the number of items that I have, I want to go back to the 0 item. So that's going to be the first item in the list. C starts counting at 0 instead of 1. So just be aware of that. And then if it's not, if it's within a value, an allowed value, I'm going to use the current index. So then I can get the working folder and the project name, just like I did earlier. Item 1 is the underscore shortcuts folder. The parent is the folder that contains it. And then the name of that folder is going to be the project name. So then I can set my working folder and my project folder and update the node. And then I have just a catch at the very end. So then I would create a brand new drawing, or the surveyor would. They're going to save it within their surveying folder, in this case, the deliverable folder. Here, I've saved it within the B project, and I'm in the A project right now. So now I can run the data shortcut toggle command. Here I can see it went to the surveying folder in the B project. I can hit the data shortcut toggle again, and then it's going to go into the B project. So now the surveyors, they don't have to hit a bunch of buttons in the UI. They just hit one button and it toggles it back and forth for them. So we're saving them work, and we've also saved the designer work because they can just hit the data shortcuts toggle for themselves. So I'm just going to go ahead and close all of my drawings. And then talk about setting the working folder, which we just did, the project, which we just did, but the next step would be to associate the project. So oftentimes when you're programming stuff, a lot of times you'll use the same workflows and methods. And so we'll want to create those methods like I did to reuse the code. So in this case, I'm replacing all of these UI elements with just one button. We're going to save the user some time. So in this case, I've used the set ds and associate to project as my command name. And this is the same code that's in the previous example, just setting up the housekeeping stuff. Here I'm using that same method where I'm going to find the underscore shortcuts folder, just like I did previously. I'm going to see if there's any that I found. And if not, I just want to let the user know that I didn't find anything, and then exit out of the command and end it. And then once again, I want to check, get the working folder. I'm going to trim it like I did previously. And then I'm going to check to see if there's more than one. Right now, I'm not supporting toggling it. So the users would have to do that. So you'd want to modify the code if you wanted to support multiple paths. So here I can get the working folder from the shortcuts using that method that I talked about in the first part of the talk. I can do the check to see if the working folder is set. And then I can get the project name just like I did previously. I can get the current project name and then do the same step of setting the current project folder, just like I did previously. So here's new code. I need to get the data shortcut project ID, and that's going to be the unique identifier that Civil 3D uses to determine what the project is. You get that by passing the full path of your project to the full name, and it's going to return the data shortcut project ID. And then to associate the drawing, you have the data shortcuts associate the project command or API call method, and you pass it the data shortcut project ID. And then now it's going to be associated to the project. And then I'm going to write that to the command line just to let the user know that what projects it's been assigned to. And then I'm going to refresh the node, and then I'm just going to demo that. So I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new drawing. I'm going to save the drawing for the user. In this case, I'm going to go back to the A project. And then, so the user creates a new drawing, they save it. Now I want them to set the data shortcut and project and associate it. I go ahead and click the button. Civil 3D has set the working folder in the project for me. Up on the title bar, I can see that it's been associated to that project. And so now I've automated that process that used to take multiple seconds. So in the code, I then want to create data references. I want to automate the process of right-clicking and creating a reference and bringing stuff all into the drawing. So then I can look at the code for that. So here, once again, is just the housekeeping. I've called the command name create data references. And so the code is the same as the previous methods. I then want to get into the next topic, which is data shortcuts, create data shortcuts manager. And I pass it a bool value or a true false value and is valid creation. So the create data shortcut manager goes and gets us the tree that exists here. So it's going to return this object in the API. So then I can get information from it. For whatever reason, it might be false. So let's say you haven't set your working folder correctly and you don't have a project. This ref value is going to return false. And so we just want to let the user know and tell them to verify that the working folder and project is set. But that's how we can get the information that's within the data shortcuts within Prospector. That data shortcut manager has a bunch of methods and properties that we can use. So we can get the exportable items and we can get the published items. So I'm gonna talk about both of these. The first one I'm gonna get is one of these. But note, there are options that I'm not gonna cover, like you can repair broken data shortcuts. So if you've moved your project and you don't wanna manually do it, there's this option here that you could program something to automate that. Or maybe you're sharing with another office and they have a different folder structure. You could create a tool that allows them to automate that. So here I have my data shortcut manager. That's that data shortcut tree. And you can use the get published items count. And that's how many data shortcuts are available within Civil 3D in the data shortcuts list. You can get the published item at, and so you're just getting the index, in this case, I, and you're getting that published item info from it. And from there, you can see what the name is, what the description is, what entity type it is, where that source file location is, and where that location is. And you can write it to the command line, or you can use that information in your code to make it more intelligent. And then to create a reference within the drawing, you just create a reference, you pass the index of the data shortcut, and then the database where you want that to be added. And the database is the information within the drawing. And so there's also a is broken, where you can have some error checking to see if it is broken. And then you could have like a UI, or you can automatically go and fix it for the user. That would be something that you could work on outside of this class. And then there's the final error catching. So here I'm in my drawing. I'm just going to go ahead and create my new project or a new drawing. And I want to come in and add in all of my data shortcuts. Maybe I have a small project and I don't want to bring everything into it, right? Instead of shifting, right click, create reference, create reference, create reference, I can just click my button. That's going to go through all the data references and then just add them to my drawing. So instead of right clicking and doing them all the time, now I just hit the button and it all brings it. You can definitely leverage this to be more intelligent. Maybe you're doing your sewer plans and you want to bring in all your sewer alignments and you have good naming conventions. You could have a button that just brings in all your sewer data shortcuts and brings it in rather than having to go through the list. So now I want to go the other way and I want to take the data shortcuts and bring them into the project. So here I have a different drawing with the same number of objects. Here I have a drawing test C, and I want to create the data shortcuts and bring them over here. Right? I know I can do the create data shortcuts and select all of the items, but there's no like select all option here. That's easy to find. And so this would automate that process and create the data shortcuts for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit the button. And now the data shortcuts are within the list. And so now I've automated that step by using the Data Shortcuts API. So the code for this is the same housekeeping as before. We're getting the Data Shortcuts Manager just like I did previously. And then instead of getting the published items, I'm getting the exportable items. I'm going to get the exportable items at. And so this is going to give me the information about that exportable item. So I can have information such as the name, the description, and what type of object it is. So if you just want to bring in all your alignments, you can filter based on the DS entity type. And then we need to set the selected item at index, and we can set it to true or false. True adds it to the list. I'm not sure if false removes it. I don't think it does. But if we set it to true, that's going to tell Civil 3D that we want to create this data shortcut. The exportable item has a bunch of properties for the dependents and the direct children items. And so if you have a profile, this will allow you to get all of the parent alignments. And if you have an alignment, this will allow you to get all of the profiles or what the sample line groups and the other items from it. And if you have a corridor, this will allow you to find out which alignments and profiles that this corridor is also going to create data shortcuts for. When you data shortcut an object that does have children, Civil 3D creates data shortcuts for all those children's for you. So in order for Civil 3D to create them, you need to save the data shortcuts manager, and you're just going to pass it that data shortcuts manager object that you set the values to true. We're then going to refresh the node, and then we have some final error catching. And so I've already demoed that. No, I didn't. Yeah, I did. And so what else can we use this for? So this is one example of what I've created using the Data Shortcuts API. Here I have all of the data shortcut projects based on the working folder that the user selected. I can automate where that file is going to be saved and give them a naming format so that they can have the save folder. I can have a file that goes and finds the survey deliverables and sets the coordinate zone based on those deliverables. And then when they hit set zone, that's going to set the zone. It's going to take Civil 3D a while to process everything. But once it's done, I then have my data shortcuts set, working folder set, the project name file is saved, and everything's done for them. Right, so I'm taking a task that would take a slow user like 5 minutes, and I'm turning it into a 30-second task, if not less. Getting a little more complicated, we can automate. In this case, I have my corridor drawing, and I want to create my section views within a different drawing, because if you create your sample lines and your section views in the same drawing as the corridor, everything slows down. So hopefully they're following our project list. And so I'm going to find the save folder based on where the project's located at. Here I'm going to create their sample lines for us. And then on this page, I have my sections. So when they tell me they want to sample that section, and there's no data shortcut already created. So in this case, I have my surfaces for corridor and datum. But over here, I see that I don't have my data shortcuts. So this is going to go ahead and create those data shortcuts for me, and then create references in my drawing that I'm creating for those sample lines. Here I have the view settings. So instead of making the users do it multiple times, they just have to do it once. And then I'm going to go and create the drawings for them. Civil 3D takes a while. It's a slow product. And so at the very end, I have my sample lines. I have my corridor. I have to refresh the node because I didn't include that code. But now I have my corridor, my view frame group. There was a pressure network in there. I have my surfaces. And it's created the data references. So I've taken a step that takes a half hour to an hour for a user and turned it into like a 4 or 5 minute task. And most of that 4 or 5 minute task is waiting for Civil 3D to get done with its processes. And so if you want the code, I put it on GitHub. And you can download that freely. If you have any questions, you can send your question to my email. I do have a crappy YouTube videos on Civil 3D that includes that startup at the beginning. And do we have any questions? I'll go ahead and paste in chat that information. I know programming is a little bit difficult in the morning, especially to start out with. But hopefully found it useful.
All right, that was good stuff. So programming that, how long do you think it took you to, doing that, all that programming and doing that first test run?
This took me like maybe an hour.
An hour? Okay, wow.
You can see on the video it took
Yeah.
On the YouTube video
Yeah.
that I posted,
Yeah.
How to set up the project, and that just took me like 10 or 15 minutes. And then going through it took me that time.
Okay, well, cool.
Your first time through it takes a little bit longer. But
Yeah.
hopefully, since I've given you all this stuff,
Yeah.
it gives you like a head start. So you're doing the stuff that you're programming the stuff that you want rather than trying to learn all of this stuff from scratch.
Okay. Cool, that's really good. Really cool stuff. Way above my head. So you're on another level. So so I want to thank everyone for watching. Like Chris said, this is actually on, you said on YouTube and also GitHub. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
I put the in chat.
Yep. And we recorded this video also. We'll post it on the CivilCAD Learning Solutions YouTube channel. And we appreciate everybody attending this class. You should be able to use this exact same link throughout the day. Our next session is our panel session. I do apologize for switching the class here, but we should be on track. We're going to have our panel discussion about implementation. Then we'll take a short break. We'll take a break and then we'll come back and then we'll do a Q&A. You can come in and ask us any questions about Civil 3D InfraWorks or vehicle tracking, maybe even Navisworks to recap a little bit. So, we'll stop here and then we'll be right back in about 10 minutes and we'll start the panel session, discussion sessions about implementation. All right, thanks everyone. Bye.